What do I mean by get it right? It seems like every time I cue this up on an iPhone and I come back to it later on, it doesn't look like what I thought I'd queued up. It's like Troy Hunter's Live, but I thought I called it Weekly Update, but I didn't. But I can see me talking there and I can see Stefan here. G'day, mate. Good morning. No, where am I? Yeah, I'm in Norway. Good evening. That is evening behind. Stefan's in Iceland until Monday when you're here, mate, in this very Airbnb, which is cool. I've got a laptop down there. It's all lining up. Wow. I shocked it all works. Jared's here. So it's been 2 years since I've caught a live stream, and you're on the other side of the world, not just the other side of the country. Yeah, like yeah. Norway. That's why I look cold. It is 4 Celsius outside. 0 today. Bad sound. Well, let's just say it's just you, and if anyone disagrees, don't say anything, because I really can't do much about it at this point in time. So here's the only thing I can do. You ready for this? I'm going to try and pull the microphone. Okay, so that's the shotgun mic that's normally in the phone. So how is it now? Because now you're just getting like native iPhone speaker, which also can't be real good. I have way too many tech problems. That's better. Closer, beautiful. Okay. As I was saying, I have way too many tech problems for someone who has made a career out of tech. But I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to do too much. Well, look, thank you all for joining. There's a lot of people here. And I do have a bunch of stuff on the agenda for today. And Stefan will know what a lot of this is going to be about. It's been a hard, at least week, maybe 2 weeks. But we'll get to that. Where were we? I just feel like totally out of sync being here, other side of the world, again. Okay, right, yeah, that's the schedule. I'm in Norway, so we're here for a bunch of different things. Yeah, anyone here knows computers? Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. We'll talk about that. Here in Norway for a bunch of different things. As I mentioned before, we will see Stefan on Monday. Norway is about, what do you reckon, mate? Let's call it 92% of the way from Australia to Iceland, where Stefan's based. So that's handy. Spent a little bit of time with Scott Helm on the weekend as well, doing some other cybery things too. So getting to this side of the world, we can at least make the most of the time. And then, let me see, a week from today, we'll be in Brussels doing some things with the folks over there. And the week after that, we've got a Europol event in The Hague, for which I have a mostly all-new talk for. It's an all-new themed talk, a couple little snippets from other things. Not recorded, not reproduced. It's for a law enforcement audience, so I guess that you get to keep things a bit quieter, which is good. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to that because they're always super cool people, super interesting people. Let me have a look at the comments here, and then I'm going to jump into the pointy end of things around this data breach that Stefan and I are struggling with at the moment. So here's what I titled this section, because I like accuracy. Loading 1,957,476,021 breached email addresses is hard. So, it's also evening. It's red wine o'clock. The emails. We did the Synthient emails last week. Now, Synthient is a company run by a guy called Ben. Ben is in his last year of college. I spoke about this last week. Ben has been really, really good at finding data that's been posted to various parts of the internet, on forums, on Telegram channels, on Tor hidden services, on other shady places where your data gets taken and then gets abused. And last week, we loaded 183 million Stealer-log entries. So this is the email address and the password and the website it's been entered into. And for the most part, this is from people whose computers have been compromised with malware, and unfortunately then it siphons up all the credentials. Now we loaded that in, and at the time when I wrote the blog post, I said, there's actually two different sets of data. There is the StealerLog data, where you've got those three pieces of data together, and there is the credential stuffing data. And the credential stuffing data is just email address and password from all sorts of different places around the internet. And just as a spoiler, my own data is in there. I have been in StealerLog's credential stuffing list before. My old email address is in there. An old horrendous password that I don't even want to talk about anymore is in there. And we all have those from years gone by as well. So we've got these two corpuses of data, and the 183 million was the small one. The other bit is effectively the number I just gave you. I'm going to round it to 2 billion. Now, 2 billion is not a hyperbolic headline. That is effectively rounding to, what is it, one or two decimal, or one or two positions after the comma. You know what I mean? It's basically 2 billion. It's massive. I'm writing the blog post at the moment, but I have gone through and got a bunch of feedback from Have I Been Pwned subscribers in there, and myself, because my own data's in there. And the sentiment at the moment is that there is a lot of data in there which is both accurate and previously unseen in Have I Been Pwned. Now, like I said, my own record was in there. It has been in StealerLogs before. That is not new. But the feedback from other people, and I've put this in the draft blog post I'm writing at the moment, the feedback from other people is that, yeah, like this is accurate. And in some cases, the people who are contacted were like, I actually now need to go and change that because I'm actively using that password in places. Now, I only reached out to Have I Been Pwned subscribers that have not been in any data breaches before, because I'm like, we have people who have been in other StealerLogs or other credential stuffing lists, the Collection 1 credential stuffing list from 2019, for example. A seminal moment in my life for many reasons. That data gets recycled. So I wanted to find people that had not been in other incidents, therefore not recycled. And I was also particularly interested in passwords that we had not previously seen in pwned passwords. And there are a lot of those as well. And the feedback I kept getting from people is there's a lot of stuff there that is both accurate and previously unseen. Also, there is stuff in there which is not accurate. My email address had, as I said, one password, which I've definitely used before, terrible one, but it also had other passwords which I have no recollection of. One of the passwords, air quoting, was an IP address from Perth. Like, I don't know how that's there, but I also find it very interesting. Of all the IP addresses and all the places in the world, it had to be an IP address of a place that I've been to quite a bit. So that I find interesting. So anyway, we've verified it, we've deduped it, we've gotten to this 2 billion number. And that then means that we've got to put it in Have I Been Pwned, and it's 2 billion records. And that is a massively hard problem. It was a massively hard problem for me doing 700 million something records for Collection 1 in 2019. And I still to this day, January 2019, have a very, very clear recollection of sitting at the airport in Brisbane just before I was about to get on a flight to come here to Oslo, coincidentally enough. I still have this recollection of trying to process that data and deal with the difficulty of processing that much. Now, I'll give you a bit of insight into why that is so difficult. And Stefan and I spent a lot of time on Zoom today trying to figure this out. And I think, Stefan, I think we're on the right track. What's he said here? Well, we found out the maximum cloud still can't handle update table. Yeah, all right, I'll give you a perfect example of where the problems are. We've got a table that has 2 billion aliases and domains in it. And that's where we start. So we started with 2 billion email addresses, then we had to split that up, which is fine until you do it 2 billion times. But then we've got the situation of about 6.5 billion unique email addresses in Have I Been Pwned already. And then they appear, each one of those is in roughly 2 breaches each. So there's another table that's got about 15 billion records in it. So what we have to do now is say, for these 2 billion records, which of them is not already in that list of 6.5? That's the unique email addresses. We've got to put them in there. And then when all that's done, we've then got to get every one of those 2 billion records, and we've got to put it in the mapping table that maps an individual email address to a breach. Now, as an example of part of the problems, one of the things that we store for every single email address in Have I Been Pwned is a hash prefix, which is the first 6 characters of a SHA-1 hash. And we do that because it drives the k-anonymity search for email address. I've written about this before. We have some enterprise subscribers, like 1Password, for example, that query email addresses of their customers using an anonymity model. So when you have an email address in Have I Been Pwned, you also have the first 6 of the 40 characters of a SHA-1 hash. Now, what that means in simple terms is, for every email address, we need to create a hash and then substring the first 6 characters. Now that's easy to do in TSQL. It's like update breach import set SHA-1 equals hash of the email address and then we're substring of that. Until you try and do it 2 billion times. And then that query completely shits itself somewhere in the middle of the night the other day. So we keep having to pivot and find other ways of doing it. And what I started to do is just started to batch. So let's put a conditional index on that SHA-1 column of the email table and take the top 1 million email addresses there that do not have a hash, and then hash those, and then you move on to the next and you just iterate through until you have none left. And then we realized that we had other problems. And one of the problems was I was trying to... Stefan eventually killed a query that had been running for 2 days. 2 days. I think actually, Stefan, we got to like 1 day and 23 hours or something like that when you killed it today. Because we were trying to update another column on there because we have to get like the ID of the domain table because it's a normalized database. So we're like joining on these 2 tables where there's 2 billion records here, and I think we've got about 300 million domains or something like that. And then you're joining on it, and then you try, and every single thing that is just like an instantaneous TSQL query with normal sets of data becomes just unfathomably difficult. So one of the things that we've realized today is sort of the most efficient way. We've done this through a combination of asking ChatGPT and trialing with smaller sets of data. One of the most efficient ways of gradually sort of enriching the data set is literally to select from one table, join into the other one where we would have just updated the first table, but then select all of that into a brand new table. But then after that's created, we'll also have to add the indexes so that we can, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And every single time we turn around trying to do something that seems fairly sensible and logical, it's painful. And part of this is that and we'll talk about this more next week, Stefan, when you're here. But like I said today, I find that I tend to go, well, this is the sensible thing to do. Let's do that, and we'll just set it running without taking the time to sort of have to step back and plan way more than what you have to. Even with this data last week, 183 million records. The query that Stefan just killed at 1 day and 23 hours took 2 hours with 183 million records. And in my brain, I'm going like, it's about 10.5 times larger. So maybe if it proratas, instead of 2 hours, it'll be like 22 hours or something like that. But no, I killed it after nearly 2 days. Joe says, welcome back to the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah, that's why I'm looking like this. I'm cold. I left Australia on Monday. It was 38 degrees Celsius at home, which is the equal hottest day I have ever recorded on our weather station. So there you go. Now, along with the 2 billion records, just to sort of talk through some of the problems we have with this. We have nearly 6 million subscribers now. And we will know a proper figure for this once we actually get this data transformed and some indexes created. But I think we have almost 2 million subscribers impacted by this breach, which means we have to send 2 million emails. Now, on the one hand, sending 2 million emails isn't hard. You're just going to iterate through them all. We actually drop them in a queue in Azure, which is pretty fast. And then there's another Azure function which picks items up from that queue and sends them out via SendGrid. That bit will work, that's fine. The bit that's more challenging is every single time we've loaded a large data breach, not a behemoth like this one, but a large one. So let's say in the hundreds of millions of records, and we have to send hundreds of thousands of emails, we inevitably get throttled by inbound mail servers. Now, I didn't know this was a thing until I started doing what I do and sending this many emails. But if you're sending emails, let's say you're sending emails to Gmail addresses, and every day you're sending, for the sake of simplicity, you're sending 100 emails. And you know, there's spikes up and down during the day, and it follows time zones. A lot of it's transactional. It's based on people doing things like signing into a dashboard. And then suddenly, one day, instead of sending 100 for the day, you send 10,000. And Google goes, hang on a moment, you know, like this looks a little bit fishy. And you get throttled. And what I mean by throttled is you deliver the mail arrives, but it doesn't go directly to the recipient's inbox. That's okay when you're sending a data breach notification. Like if someone finds out at the moment you send it that they're in this corpus versus 1, 2, 3 hours later, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that as soon as you start getting throttled, if, let's say someone, I'll give you a parallel example here. Let's say someone's like, okay, I now want to sign into my dashboard so I can look at my exposure and stealer logs, and to sign in you have to get an email. We need to do those passkeys, actually, Stefan, because that also solves this problem. Anywho, so let's imagine you have to get an email and you're signing to the dashboard. It's like, we've just sent you an email. And then they're looking at their inbox going, no, you haven't. Like, I haven't received it. So delaying things like that has a profound impact on the usability of the system. And then what happens is not only do people get understandably pissed off, but then they log us a ticket to tell us that they're pissed off. And then I have to go into the SendGrid dashboard and look up the email address and then answer the ticket by saying, we sent it, but your mail server's delayed delivery to you. So one of the things that we've decided to do is when we drop that email message in the queue, we're now setting a visibility delay for individual notifications. And we've got a little bit of maths here around what we think is a reasonable maximum rate to send emails. And it could mean that in this particular case, it could be that we send all the emails, but you don't receive it until 4 days later, because the queue will literally hide that message until the visibility pops it up to the surface and the Azure function picks it up and sends it. Now, again, we can do that on breach notifications in order to preserve the deliverability for things that are much more time critical. We don't need to do that when sending notifications to the domain users, because then you've got people on all sorts of different domains. If we've got, I'm guessing we'll have 100,000 people that we have to send emails to say you've got email addresses on your domain that are compromised. But those 100,000 people are spread across a much broader set of domains than, say, Gmail. Individuals, we know that, for argument's sake, 20% of them are going to have Gmail addresses, maybe more. So they're the ones that we've got to slow down. And the domain notifications, we can pretty much just blast out all at once. Unless you get to a situation, I haven't thought about this, where maybe, let's say you've got a whole bunch of people using Microsoft 365, and they're all different domains, but they're all the same underlying infrastructure, and then underneath, Microsoft decides to throttle. I don't know. Yeah, crap, maybe that's bad. We'll figure that out next week. So the point is that it is extraordinarily difficult to do effectively exactly the same thing that we do with very, very small volumes when you have very, very large volumes. And we're having to work this out as we go. And Steph and I sort of worked out all the steps today. And now we effectively have to run queries and wait. Even when I flew to Australia, I left my house in Australia. I started a query running. And the query was actually to create 2 indexes back to back. I started the indexes creating. I left my house, went to the airport, waited around, flew to Dubai, waited around, flew to Oslo, got the train, got to the Airbnb, and they were still running. So I flew, and it was literally 30 hours door to door too. I flew from one side of the world to the other in less time than it took to create 2 indexes on tables that otherwise would have been instantaneous with any normal set of data. Joe says, I used to work on the largest social survey in the UK, and getting the business to understand that they need to smooth out the sending curve, so rather than spikes, was unpleasant. Marketing people, right? Consistent volume is key, but really hard to do for you. Yeah, it is. And that's why I'm hoping this current situation, or rather implementing this visibility control, I'm just hoping that if we smooth that out a bit, I'm still not convinced we're not going to have problems. And I think, Stefan, we do need to have in the back of our pocket what happens if we get like badly in the naughty list or something to that effect. Now, speaking of kind of bad things happening, when I was on the plane from Brisbane to Dubai, 13.5-hour flight, minimal Wi-Fi, you get on the plane at 9 o'clock at night, so you try and have a good sleep. And I have a good sleep, and I wake up and I check my mail, and there's like 40 emails, most of them from journalists asking about the Gmail breach. Now, I was tired, and I'd had some champagne, and I'm looking at it going, what? There's no Gmail, like what do you mean? And then as I'm trying to read through the news stories on that like 10 kilobit connection or whatever it is that Emirates actually gives you, what emerges is that some journo very early on took the story about this Scythian threat data, credential stuff, or rather steel log data, and somehow made a headline about it being a Gmail breach. And then other journos, I won't tell you what I think about most of them, took that headline and reproduced it. And now all over the world, there are all these headlines about the Gmail data breach and go to have I been pwned to check it. Now, I wasn't real happy with that. And a large part of the reason is because it turns it into something much more sensationalist than what it is. It is obviously not a Gmail breach. It's a bunch of people who had malware and their credentials got siphoned up, and many of them are on Gmail because Gmail is the most popular mail provider by far. And that's why there's a lot of Gmail stuff. And I actually think I know where it went wrong. I think I know which journalist it was and which outlet it was. And when I said that name to Charlotte, she was like, yeah, well, that's just a trashy rag. So I'm not going to say it on this podcast. But I do remember, I can't recall if I was speaking to the journalist or typing. There's been so many of them in the last week. I do remember questions to the effect of, are there Gmail people in there? I was like, well, of course there's Gmail people in there. It's like they're normal people on the internet, so there's going to be a lot of Gmail in there. So anyway, someone picked it up and made a much bigger story than what it is. So I have been in touch with people at Google who are, fortunately, they understand. So, because it's a little bit like, imagine if we had just gone out and said, yeah, it's a Gmail data breach. And then they get smashed with these queries. And they've had to make statements online as well. They have a thread there on X, and I'm sure they've got it in other places as well, where they're explaining that Gmail systems are secure. Like, this isn't a compromise of Gmail. It's data from other places. So we are trying to help our friends out at Google so that they can at least quantify the accounts that might have been impacted by this. It's, it shouldn't come to this, but yeah. So that's the not Gmail breach. Speaking of other difficult data breach things, Qantas. Let's talk about Qantas. Now, I've spoken a lot about Qantas lately because they got the injunction. And they got this injunction in Australia, which everybody finds weird for many reasons. Part of the reason we find it weird is the injunction prohibits law-abiding Australians who know about the injunction from accessing the data, which is me on every one of those 3 counts. But I'm not a lawyer, but as best I understand it, the injunction gets served on the threat actor. Imagine that. Some scattered lapsus spiders, shiny hunters have gone and taken all of this data, and then they get served by Qantas's lawyers to say, you're not allowed to have this data and you're not allowed to publish it. Now, I know exactly the words that these folks would use in response to that. and it wouldn't have been receptive. Let's just say it's not receptive. So it would have gone absolutely nowhere. But I don't understand exactly how the legal mechanisms work, but the injunction itself is not public. It's not on like the court's website or something like that, but it still applies to people like me. And I still don't understand how that works, but I am told with great authority from our digital lawyers, who I trust completely, that that is how it works. Now, where I think this has gotten really interesting is, and I'm just scrolling here on the iPad trying to find this. At some point in here, there's a story. This is only, when I posted this 4 days ago, there's a quote from Qantas. "We felt the injunction was an important course of action to further protect our customers, and so far it has been effective in preventing the stolen data from being accessed, released, or published by third parties." Now that is a complete crock of shit. And here is why. I have added that straight after I've got a screen cap here. A good friend of mine who I trust completely has said, interestingly, Norton Dark Web Monitoring this week noted that they found my Qantas data exposed. So Norton has the Qantas data. They're literally telling Qantas customers, we have your record from the Qantas data, you're in the Qantas. They're doing exactly what we would do with Have I Been Pwned if it weren't for the injunction. I found that interesting. And then a little bit later on, I was chatting to a journalist. And then, in fact, that was when I was over this side of the world. And without saying who the journalist was or what the outlet was, I'm sure they'll write something about this. But they said Equifax has notified customers in the Qantas data breach. Now, Equifax, everyone knows, is a massive US identity monitoring, credit monitoring organization. They bought, I think it was called Vida at the time, previously Baycor, Australian Credit Monitoring Agency. So they have a big footprint in Australia. They have, I would assume, at least hundreds of thousands of customers there. Now, they welfare beast. I do understand that little bit of Norwegian, but no, I won't. Nearly 1,000 days on Duolingo now. How about that? So anywho, the point is that Equifax has this large footprint in Australia. They're an American company, but they have a big Australian presence. They are notifying Qantas customers that they're in the Qantas data breach. And I would love, as I've said here in the tweet, assuming that's a violation of the court order by a company operating in Australia, what next? Are there consequences? Or is the injunction effectively toothless against this sort of use case? Now, having said that, I'm not going to turn around and put Qantas data in Have I Been Pwned. I know I could find it really, really easily because contrary to Qantas' statement here, effective in preventing the stolen data being accessed, released, or published by third parties, as I gave my technical explanation just earlier, which is bullshit, because it is everywhere. I've had so many people pop up and send it, and Norton has it, and Equifax has it, and whoever else. It's just all over the place. And I just find it fascinating that it's like Iraqi information minister levels of disinformation. It is totally ineffective, this injunction of having that data redistribute, not just to the bad parties, which surely even they knew that the criminals weren't going to follow the court order, but the good parties. Assuming you think Norton and Equifax are good, but you know what I mean, the legally operating parties. So anyway, that's everywhere, and I can't add any more to it. It's so stupid, it's ridiculous. All right, let's do something a little bit more fun, and then as you can see, the sun has pretty much set in Norway. 5 p.m, sun's gone down. Now, mind you, we'll be back here in a couple of months, and then the sun will be down at like 3:30. So, different story again. PC build. So I've spoken on multiple weeks about doing a PC build. I've got a gist here, which lots of people are chimed in on. I have really, really good feedback here. And it is heartening to see people have robust arguments as well, convinced that other people do not know what they're talking about. That is the Twitter of old, so thank you for bringing that back a bit. we had lots of good feedback. I contacted 2 PC builders in Australia. There's 2 different companies that specialize in building very often like high-end gaming machines and so on, but they'll build you whatever they want. Their organizations, particularly the one I think I'll be going with it, that are fairly well known. I was pretty happy with the way both of them read through that list of the things I wanted and then came back with a spec. And I've posted, I haven't posted the quote, so I think I'll wait until I actually buy all this stuff and then I'll tell you how much it hurts, which will be significant, but business expense, ROI, etc. So where I think we're at is going with a Threadripper, AMD Threadripper. That just seemed to be the most consistently agreed on spec. In terms of speed, where were we here? Threadripper 9970X, 5.4 gigahertz, 32 cores with 64 threads, 512 gig of memory as well, ECC memory. So error correcting, what's the other letter stand for? Memory. But yeah, I think half a TB of memory would be good. What they didn't put in this spec here, they only had a 1 terabyte Samsung 9100 Pro NVMe, and I would like 3-4 terabytes. I think the 4 terabyte is where the sweet spot is. You know how, like, whether it's hard disk storage or GPUs or anything else, there's like a point where you're spending more money and you're getting more performance, and then suddenly you're spending way more money and you're getting a little bit more performance. So it's finding that sweet spot. And with storage, it seems that those 4 terabyte Samsungs are the sweet spot at the moment. You can get an 8 terabyte, but I forget what happened with the price, but it was just like, that's starting to get stupid. So I think if we get 3 of those, and I've still got some mechanical disks as well, we can always chuck in if it's like longer term storage where read speed doesn't matter as much. What else on here? Graphics card. They have on here, where'd the graphics card go? Where is that graphics card? The one complaint I would have here with the way these folks put it together is it's not nicely formatted. ASUS RTX 5070 Prime with 12 gigabytes of RAM here. I think that, based on what other people said, could be a little bit beefier. I've drafted a response to these guys. I've asked people to come and chime in on this more. Talking to you now, I'll ask them to come back and give me maybe a couple of slightly higher end options. And there's the drive thing. And then Stefan, when you're here, because you know much more about what you're doing on this than me, hopefully I have the responses then and we can look over it together and see if it makes sense. 11 fans, 2200 RPM, 12 120 millimeter fans. So someone sort of said, just make sure this company actually builds a lot of these and not just like chucking a gazillion fans in. This particular company, I'm very confident builds a lot of high-end machines. Look, they warranty it all. They do on-site delivery and everything as well, or collection if there's warranty issues. So that gives me some confidence there. Let's look at the comments. Jared said Threadrippers are crazy. I'll take, what's the spec of your current PC? Well, it's a good question. It's at home. I ended up, this was at the start of COVID, when, as you know, everything was a little bit crazy. And the machine before that I had built with someone else, and that would have been like a decade ago, more. And Wayne, I will answer your question. The one at home is a Lenovo 720p, I think, desktop machine. I ended up, again, at the start of COVID, and everything was a bit nuts, literally just going through and speccing it on the Lenovo website. I was still involved in the Lenovo Insiders program at the time, so I think I got some deals on it as well. That kind of made sense then. Now, I just feel that, particularly given the requirements with how I've been playing and watching how fast Stefan's been going with his really fast machine, I just wanted something that was built a little bit more to spec. And I didn't really want to go down that Lenovo path, particularly when you just don't get the same value, especially now I don't get Lenovo deals, as going and getting something custom built. So Wayne, the answer to why not build it yourself is that I barely have time to see my children. I like to do the things that I actually really, really want to do in life. Decades gone past, I spent a lot of time building machines and I really enjoyed it and it was great. I feel completely out of touch with it now. I don't want to go through that trial and error. I don't want to have the responsibility of not only finding all the different components and ordering them and putting them together and testing them. I just want to go to someone, this is my set of requirements, just build the thing and send it to me. I think you came in a little bit later, but I was talking before about how much time has been burned in the last couple of weeks trying to process the credential stuffing data that we'll hopefully have live and have been pwned next week. That honestly, that's where my value is. And I appreciate, just as I say that I've pretty much shipped it to Stefan now to do that stuff. But now I'm having to go on and do all the next bits. I just don't have the time, mate. I don't have the same passion for it as what I did before as well. I just want someone to go, here it is, it all works, and then I'll configure it and do everything else I need to, obviously. But yeah, so Stefan's looking forward to reviewing it. Yeah, man, like it'll be cool. But Wayne, it's like a lot of different things in life where there's certain times where you do things yourself, and then there are certain times where you feel like your time is better spent other places. I still wash the cars every now and then, but we have a person who comes and does a lot of that. We have someone to do the gardening because I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't want to learn how to do it, other than the hydroponics, which I blew way too much time on. So yeah, it's really just a matter of where I prioritize time. Okay, so looking at the list, I think that's it pretty much brings us through to the end of this week, folks. I have literally been losing sleep trying to figure out how to process all of this data. Like waking up in the middle of the night, I was telling Stefan this as well, waking up in the middle of the night going, I wonder if that query has finished yet. It hadn't. It was still going 2 days later when I got up this morning. But that's where my brain is these days, like trying to figure out how to solve problems around things like how do we get 2 billion records in there, and then how do we get notifications out to 2 million of our subscribers. All the while not making it look like another freaking Gmail data breach, which is not. I've literally got a section in my new blog post about this. This is not a Gmail data breach. Because we've got to, there's just so many things to think about. And as Have I Been Paying gets bigger and bigger and bigger and it gets more exposure, I know that every time we process data like this, we'll get smashed by media inquiries, we'll get smashed by tickets, which can be everything from very genuine things of people wanting to get subscriptions and having questions, through to just frankly annoying ones, through to people. We'll get a bunch of abuse. We'll have people abuse us because they'll say, if you can't give me the password for my email address and it's no good, screw you guys. And then we'll be like, well, you don't have to use the system, it is free. You can go on and just do something else with life. So that dominates our time. And hopefully next week I'll be talking to you from Belgium. I might even do it a day later because I think we get to Belgium into Spa a little bit later on Friday. Might be a Saturday next week. But hopefully I'll be able to talk to you then and go, hey, we managed to get it all loaded. We solved our technical problems. We created the indexes and ran the queries and got all the notifications out and didn't get blacklisted and all the rest of it. So hopefully that will be the story next week, but we'll see. All right, folks, on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. It looks late here in Oslo. It is 5:10 p.m. in the evening. So I'm going to go and have some dinner. Thanks very much. And Stefan, see you in a few days, mate. Maybe those queries would have run